But first, one of the things we try to do on 207 is take you to places in Maine you likely have never seen. With this story, we're pretty sure we've succeeded. Maine has about 6,000 lakes and ponds. There may be no one who has seen more of them at a certain level than Steve Underwood. Several years ago, Underwood began snorkeling in Maine rivers with a camera, then branched out into lakes and ponds.
I mean, I had this little crappy camera, and kind of once you get under there and you get a really nice scene of fish or whatever, I just kind of got hooked on it.
What the rest of us see of Maine's lakes and rivers is beautiful, but surface appearances can be deceiving. And Underwood's excursions became more focused when he learned about the nonprofit organization Lake Stewards of Maine, which monitors the water quality of lakes all over the state.
They would list the lakes by clarity, so you would see the top 10 clearest lakes in Maine, and I would just start driving and diving those lakes.
What lies beneath the surface is another world. Not wildly exotic, but fascinating, at times mesmerizing. Preserving it has become part of Steve Underwood's life. So in the last year or two, what has your focus been? When you get into the water, what have you been doing?
Last summer and this summer, I've been up in Princeton at Big Lake, which is fed by Grand Lake Stream out of West Grand Lake. Amazing trout fishing up there. And they found out in late 2019 that they had a large invasive milfoil infestation.
Underwood is helping to make a documentary on the threat invasive plants pose to lakes and ponds. The footage he shoots is not something you find just by searching on YouTube.
You know, early on when people said, oh, you must use scuba, and I'm going, never, I'm certified, but it's so heavy and clunky, and you're making a lot of noise underwater, so it's when you can be just absolutely still and silent, that's when the underwater wildlife will come to you.
How long do you stay underwater?
Well, I mean, my longest resting breath hold was 5.5 minutes, but I might stay under for 30 seconds or a minute, which feels pretty long when you're underwater.
How deep do you typically go?
Typically 15 or 20 feet. The first 6 to 10 feet of water is where most of the plants are and a lot of the fish. And when you get down into those deeper depths, the light drops off, and it's just not as photogenic. So I'm usually very near the surface.
Now, you may be thinking, this guy looks kind of familiar. Well, when he's on dry land, Steve Underwood is an actor, inventor, co-founder of Good Theater in Portland, and most recently, creator of the humorous music video, Now You're Talking Down East.
You could be living in Berwick, you could be living in Booth Bay, but when you open your mouth, you sound like you're from away.
I want to assume that there's maybe no one or virtually no one else in Maine who's doing what you're doing, getting really quality underwater video, doing it without scuba gear,
right,
and then putting it together with a purpose.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's been amazing. And a lot of the footage I saw back in the early 2000s was, well, where do you go diving off the coast? It was all about the ocean, and when I realized how little footage there was of lakes and ponds. And I think my favorite thing to dive is rivers, because from top to bottom they're the same temperature. It doesn't get cold when you go deeper. And when you're just kind of cruising along with a camera and you start seeing stuff, it's like a dolly shot in a movie, or like a drone shot underwater. And that's what kind of early on got me really hooked on how much fun it was.
As you peer down the road, do you have some sort of a documentary, or maybe a really big kind of documentary that really covers a lot of territory with a really strong message that you would like to make?
The big project right now is the project up at Big Lake and those other lakes that connect to it that have an infestation, because people have said, well, those lakes are so far north, they're never going to have a problem. But if you go west 100 and whatever miles, Lake Champlain has probably 24 invasives, and they are just struggling to keep coves open and ahead of an insidious kind of ongoing threat.
The aim of his work is to make people aware of how easy it is for careless boaters to spread invasive plants.
Hopefully it will wake people up to the fact that you can be in a hurry to put your boat in, and a tiny piece of plant on your prop or your paddle or whatever can start a chain reaction where some really nasty stuff gets growing in lakes that is not good for them at all.
The battle against invasive plants has no end in sight. Underwood is signed up for the duration. He'll be in the water for a long time to come. Steve Underwood says the documentary he's been working on that focuses heavily on Big Lake in Washington County will likely be out before the end of the year. If you'd like to find out more about Steve and the organization Lake Stewards of Maine, just head to the 207 section of our News Center Maine website or app.